This talk is about something seemingly impossible. It's how to implement a UBI without extra tax, debt or inflation, or negatively impacting welfare recipients, and all with little risk. I'm Michael Haynes and I'm talking on behalf of Basic Income Australia. Our objective is pretty simple. It's to introduce a universal basic income paid to all adult Australian residents every week at or above the Henderson poverty line by 2030. The current target's $500 a week per adult, but starting with a low initial payment in 2025 or sooner if possible, and I'll come back later in the talk to explain why we're suggesting this phasing. But first, why a UBI? We believe it's required to address a basic system failure. Once it was the birthright of every person to live off the land. Today, with property rights, money and the system of paid work, this is no longer possible. As Scott Santens has observed, humans are now the only species that need money to survive. Now, the system has delivered huge benefits for the majority, but it's left a significant minority literally destitute. It's those who cannot do paid work and who have no savings or family support. That's around 3.2 million Australians, mostly women, kids, the aged and disabled, and some between jobs. And this isn't a static group. The kids grow up, the disabled age, the aged die, and their carers and those between jobs find other work only to be replaced by a new group. More jobs cannot solve the problem for those who can't do paid work. We believe poverty is largely a system problem. Most people are poor not because they're lazy, but because they cannot earn money. Without money, they're invisible to the market, so the market can never respond. Now, this is bad for them, it's bad for business, and it's ultimately bad for society. Yet we have unlimited money because we create the stuff. In Australia, at least, we've also got the resources and capability to meet everyone's basic needs and much more. Welfare, we believe, is not the answer. We regard it as part of the problem because it's deliberately set below the poverty line to encourage people who can work to take the available jobs. And we can't fix this by paying more, because the higher the rate, the more rational it is for people to take the benefit in lieu of a low-paid job. And this, as we know, is the welfare trap. A UBI provides a system solution to the system failure. It restores each person's birthright by providing the money that they need to survive. And it avoids the welfare trap because people don't lose their UBI if they take on paid work. It provides a floor to stand on, not a ceiling to achievement. We then end up with a 4-tier income system. A universal basic income to meet every citizen's basic needs. Earned income for the 50% of the population able to do paid work at any time to better themselves and their family. Welfare to meet the additional costs of living for those who are incapacitated or for child and aged care, and passive income for those fortunate enough to have their own savings or family support. Despite paying the UBI to everyone, we can effectively target it to the neediest by doing two things. Firstly, phasing in recovery of the UBI on taxable earnings up to $80,600, and above that, the full UBI would be recovered. And secondly, the UBI would replace welfare benefits below the level of the UBI, while benefits above the UBI would be retained to ensure that no one is worse off. We believe that this will directly benefit 75% of the population on a sliding scale, with the rest benefiting from the additional economic activity and living in a less fearful and hostile society. To explain how the recovery would work, if we look at somebody who is earning no income at all, well, they'll get the full UBI without any recovery, and that will leave them clearly way ahead. For someone earning $52,000 a year, they gross $1,000 and after tax net $838. They would get their $500 a week UBI, but then have to repay $322, which is 32.26% of their gross, leaving them with a net of $178. The recovery can be done through the group tax system, via the GST system, or a specially designed app for those who are self-employed. The net UBI plus the net earned income would give a total net that then exceeds their gross, clearly leaving them better off. For someone earning $80,600 a year or more, they'll gross a minimum of $1,550 with a net of $1,200. They'll also get their UBI, but at that level and beyond, they'll have to pay it all back each week. They'll still get their net earned income, so they're no better off, but they're no worse off either. This slide shows the impact of the UBI on the weekly youth allowance for 18 to 22-year-olds with no income. The current benefit is $265 a week, but with the UBI that would be reduced to zero. Instead, they receive $500 UBI unconditionally, and that would leave them with the net benefit of $500, which clearly puts them much better off. Now, this age group covers the transition from dependency to full participation as a contributing member of society, and this isn't always an easy transition. In fact, I took a straw poll of 17-year-olds that suggests several could pool their UBI to get a share house and simply party, and they agreed that if this did become a problem, it would probably be appropriate to retain some study or work requirements for this age group. This slide looks at the impact of the UBI on weekly job seeker payments for 22 to 67-year-olds with no income. They currently receive a conditional benefit of $334 a week. That would be reduced by the UBI to zero, and they would then get instead $500 unconditionally as UBI. Clearly, they're going to be better off financially, and because they can now use their time to study, look for work and/or care for themselves and their family. And most people get work within 2 years, and when they do, they'll repay the UBI at the rate of 32.26% of their weekly gross, up to $80,600, and above that in full. Importantly, by eliminating conditionality, the resources now devoted to assessing and controlling benefits can be redirected to achieving better outcomes for each individual. People receiving a weekly pension or disability allowance who have no income currently get a benefit of $513, which would be reduced by the UBI to just $13 a week. They'd get their UBI unconditionally, so that the pension plus UBI together leaves them with an unchanged weekly benefit, so they're no worse off. They'd also continue to get their healthcare card and other ancillary benefits. In regard to any passive income they may earn in retirement, the UBI would be recovered based on 32.26% of that income, up to $80,600, and above that it'd be fully recovered. And this is more generous than the current income phasing. There's also a good argument to be made that once the UBI is implemented, the rental allowance could be substantially increased. The rationale for paying it universally but targeting the net benefit is that targeting reduces the amount required to fund the UBI while benefiting those who need it most. By offsetting the UBI, benefits will naturally phase out as the rate is raised, so that no person is worse off. And paying it and recovering it might seem inefficient, but it makes the payment universal. So there's no stigma for receiving it, there's minimal administration, and it provides basic income insurance. What do we mean by basic income insurance? Well, by paying the UBI to everyone every week, if you lose your income for any reason, say you get divorced, sick or injured,
or for any of the other reasons on the screen, or for any other reason at all, you are assured that your UBI will continue every week to meet your basic needs. There's no delay, there's no need to apply. There's no bureaucracy to prove that you qualify. There's more time to look for work and to care for yourself and your family. And when you get a job, there's no need to tell anyone or how much you're earning, except the taxman, of course.
Which brings us to the thorny problem of how to fund the UBI without changing our tax system, increasing debt, taking from other programs, or increasing inflation. If we were to pay 20 million adults $500 per week each, that would amount to $520 billion a year, which is clearly unsustainable in Australia's $2 trillion economy. Fortunately, there are a number of offsets. Firstly, recovery of the UBI based on earned income would save around $213 billion. Welfare and administrative savings are estimated at a further $142 billion. And as the UBI is spent into the economy, it'll generate additional economic activity resulting in profits that will deliver extra tax. We're estimating a further $35 billion. Those profits will also flow out into the financial and international economies, relieving inflationary pressure in the real economy. The impact there we're estimating at $30 billion. And technological deflation of 1% due to automation, virtualisation and AI is also estimated to relieve inflationary pressures in the real economy, around $20 billion. Savings from improved health, lower crime and increased productivity are also estimated at $20 billion. That would leave $50 billion residual to be funded, and this money could simply flow into the economy to generate additional growth as it is used to signal unmet basic needs, or it could lead to inflation. So to fund the residual UBI and to manage inflation, as we said, we're not proposing any change to our tax or welfare system or increase in debt or cuts to other programs. We recognise that these methods could be used, but by leaving our current systems untouched, no one can complain that they are disadvantaged. Instead, we're proposing to fund the residual UBI by issuing new Australian dollars. Now, this might sound like MMT, a magic money tree, but it's not. There's nothing magic about how money is created, allocated and spent into the economy. There's just a lack of common understanding. And this despite the now famous 2014 Bank of England paper that explains the majority of money in the modern economy is created by commercial banks making loans. Borrowers then spend the new Australian dollars into the economy to meet their needs, and in the process underpinning growth and inflation. But there's no natural law that says bank lending is the only way new money must be created and allocated. So given this is the reality, we can replace some new commercial bank lending with new UBI money from the Reserve Bank by simply increasing interest rates to damp new borrowings for non-essential spending. How we target non-essential spending is topic for another day, but by offsetting money flows, there should be no additional inflation pressure due to the UBI. Overall, economic activity should remain at full capacity, but more would be directed to meeting basic needs and less on other spending. Importantly, it would replace some debt with sovereign money, helping to stabilise the economy, as Jeff Croker has suggested in his book Basic Income and Sovereign Money.
This will leave us with three main ways to inject new money into the economy. First, the universal basic income to meet individual citizens' needs as their birthright, fixing the system failure. Secondly, to cover government deficit spending for additional public goods and services that we might agree upon. And thirdly, via bank lending to meet borrowers' needs. But of the three ways, given people must have money, we believe that providing a UBI for survival must take precedence. If inflation remains a problem, despite the offsets, and despite increases in interest rates to mitigate bank lending, as a last resort, we can impose a flat percentage tax on all spending. Now, combined with the UBI, this results in a distribution curve shown by the blue line in this graph. Above the red line, those earning medium to high incomes will pay additional tax. Those below the red line will receive a net benefit. So despite everyone receiving the same UBI and paying the same percentage tax on spending, the net effect is steeply progressive. The tax circulates back to people via the UBI, and unlike interest, it would have a more immediate impact without feeding inflation. The UBI obviously would need to be increased to maintain its real value as the tax is imposed.
We're also suggesting a new authority be set up to manage the UBI. It would have its own charter, and it would liaise with the Reserve Bank Tax Office and Welfare to set up and manage the UBI. And it would do it similar to how the Reserve Bank manages interest rates, in small steps.
While there have been many successful pilots around the world over several decades, none have been universal, so it's difficult to extrapolate their costs and benefits. By starting small, it allows us to conduct what is effectively a universal pilot while mitigating risk. We're suggesting that we start at just $10 a week, but for life, and once the scheme is introduced, it would continue indefinitely. Now, it might not seem like much, but to a person in poverty, $10 can be food for a day. Then we propose increasing the rate by, say, $25 a week each quarter over 5 years to achieve the target rate of $500 a week, adjusted for inflation in the basics.
By starting small and phasing it in, it allows us to establish and test the administration systems, and importantly, it gives the supply chain time to adapt without creating shortages that drive inflation. And as the rate is being increased, we can monitor inflation, labour market impacts and behavioural changes. So again, we can look at the impact on that cohort of 18 to 22-year-olds and see if in fact the UBI is causing a problem. And in that case, if adverse impacts appear, the increase in the UBI can be halted until they can be countermeasured.
Perhaps counterintuitively, a UBI could also be an inflation circuit breaker. As it's gradually increased, it would provide an effective wage rise without cost to employers, avoiding cost-push inflation, as well as benefiting those without a job who are also suffering from rising prices. It could be a big win for unions and employers if they support it, similar to the 1983 Hawke-Keating Accord, where unions gave up some wage rises for social benefits.
Once the UBI reaches the poverty line, it can be turned into a new, powerful tool to balance the labour market. And this is because everyone has a different desire and ability to take paid work, so that as the UBI is increased, some people will choose to stop looking for or will drop out of paid work, or they'll reduce their hours, and this will leave an opening for someone who wants the work. The job market will then cycle in a new dynamic balance. Most vacancies will be filled within standard recruitment times, and most people who are not in paid work and the ones who are in paid work will be doing it by choice.
Despite all that, we recognise a UBI is not a silver bullet. It addresses only the demand side. We still need government. We still need to ensure the supply of adequate housing, health and education, along with other public goods and services. And we need NGOs. We need them to provide life skills and tools, e.g. parenting and budgeting apps and support to help people thrive and not simply survive. And we need unions to better share productivity in the form of shorter work week, mutual flexibility, work from home, job share, better pay and conditions and safety. A UBI could be truly transformative. From pilots and the literature across the world, we've identified 59 benefits for individuals, business, the economy, the government and the community. Now, theorising, modelling and piloting have shown us the possibilities of universality. Eliminate systemic poverty, effective wage increase for low paid, some compensation for unpaid work in the home, a basic income insurance for the rest, and a new tool to help balance the labour market. Less anger and fear in the community, more productive effort and entrepreneurship, less crime and better health and education. But the only way to prove it is to do it, starting small to minimise risk. The UBI is not only about poverty. In fact, it's the most democratic means of allocating resources. And it's not government spending, it is citizen spending. It gives each person a direct vote in how society's resources ought to be allocated to meet their own basic needs. And in the process, the money circulates to boost sales, profits and wages, benefiting local communities.
Overall, it will result in a more competitive Australia. The security offered by a universal basic income will underpin lifelong learning, entrepreneurship and creativity, and it will provide a more flexible and committed workforce. Join us at basicincomeaustralia.com to help make the vision real.